The bustling marketplace of Nexus Station hummed with the voices of a dozen alien species. Towering Zephyrians with their crystalline wings negotiated trade deals with the squat, heavily armored Karathi. Slender Etherians floated past on anti-gravity platforms, their translucent skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that spoke volumes in their silent language. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices, ozone from plasma welders, and the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. In the center of this chaos stood Marcus Chen, a human merchant whose small cargo ship had just docked after a 3-week journey from Earth's outer colonies. His weathered face showed the strain of the trip, and his simple brown jacket marked him as someone of little importance in this grand cosmic bazaar. Around him, beings worth fortunes in galactic credits discussed deals that could reshape entire star systems, while he clutched a data pad containing his meager inventory of Earth-grown coffee beans and handcrafted textiles. The crowd barely noticed him. To most of the galaxy, humans were still newcomers, a young species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. They were tolerated but not respected, seen as enthusiastic but naive children playing at the edges of a game far older and more complex than they could understand. Marcus had been standing there for nearly an hour, trying to catch the attention of potential buyers. Each time he approached a group, they would glance at his human features and politely but firmly redirect their attention elsewhere. The universal translator in his ear whispered fragments of conversations about deals worth millions, partnerships spanning light years, and technologies that could revolutionize civilizations. Another human trying to play merchant. He heard a Zephyrian comment to its companion, the crystal formations on its wings chiming softly with what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of laughter. They think their primitive goods will interest the galaxy. Marcus felt his shoulders slump slightly, but he forced himself to maintain his composure. He had promised his daughter back on New Geneva that this trip would change their fortunes. The medical treatments she needed were expensive, and Earth's healthcare system was still struggling to catch up with galactic standards. This trade mission was supposed to be their breakthrough. The crowd surged around him like a river flowing around a stone. Magnificent beings in elaborate environmental suits discussed the purchase of entire worlds. Traders with cybernetic enhancements calculated profit margins in real time through their neural implants. Diplomatic envoys from the Galactic Council moved through the masses with an escort of sleek security drones. That's when he noticed her. She was unlike anyone else in the marketplace. While every other being there wore their wealth and importance like armor, she moved with quiet confidence through the crowd. Her species was unfamiliar to Marcus, humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality that seemed to shift between pale blue and silver depending on the light. Her hair, if it could be called that, appeared to be made of fine metallic threads that moved with a life of their own. She wore simple, elegant clothing that somehow managed to look both practical and expensive. What struck Marcus most was how she observed everything around her. While others were absorbed in their own conversations and deals, she watched the interactions, the power dynamics, the subtle currents of respect and dismissal that flowed through the gathering. Her large, dark eyes seemed to catalog every detail, every slight, every moment of triumph or defeat. She had been watching him too, Marcus realized. For the past 10 minutes, as he had been repeatedly ignored and brushed aside, she had been observing his attempts to engage with the various traders and merchants. There was something in her expression that Marcus couldn't quite read, but it wasn't the casual dismissal he had grown accustomed to from others. The marketplace reached a new crescendo of activity as a delegation from the hegemony arrived. The hegemony controlled a significant portion of the galactic trade routes, and their presence always meant big deals were about to be struck. The crowd naturally gravitated toward them, leaving Marcus even more isolated in his corner of the vast space. He was about to give up for the day when he noticed the mysterious woman moving in his direction. Unlike the purposeful stride of someone heading to an important meeting, her approach was deliberate but unhurried. She seemed to be studying him as she walked, as if trying to solve a puzzle. When she stopped in front of him, the noise of the marketplace seemed to fade slightly. Up close, Marcus could see that her eyes held an intelligence that was both ancient and sharp. There were faint markings around her temples that might have been tattoos or natural features, and they seemed to pulse faintly with their own inner light. The crowd continued to swirl around them, completely unaware of this small interaction. To everyone else, it was just another insignificant human talking to another minor trader. But something in the woman's bearing suggested that this assessment might be dangerously wrong. She looked at Marcus for a long moment, then at his datapad with its modest inventory, then back at his face. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the ambient noise with surprising ease. "I have been watching you," she said, her accent unlike anything in Marcus's universal translator database. "You approach each group with respect. You listen before you speak, and you accept rejection with dignity. These are not common qualities in this place." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. He had expected another polite dismissal, perhaps with advice about finding more appropriate venues for his goods. Instead, she seemed to be offering something that might have been a compliment. "Thank you," he said carefully. "Though I'm afraid dignity doesn't pay for cargo holds or medical bills." A slight smile touched the corners of her mouth. "You speak of medical bills? Someone you care about is ill?" The question caught Marcus off guard. In the impersonal world of galactic commerce, personal matters were rarely discussed, yet something in her tone suggested genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "My daughter," he found himself saying. "She needs treatments that aren't available in the outer colonies. Earth's medical technology is still decades behind galactic standards." The woman nodded slowly, as if this information fit into some larger pattern she had been mapping. Around them, the marketplace continued its frantic pace, but Marcus felt as if they were standing in a bubble of calm. "What is your name?" she asked. "Marcus Chen. And you are?" "I am called Lyrian," she replied, "though names, like many things here, can be deceiving." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by that, she gestured toward his datapad. "May I see your inventory?" Marcus handed it over, expecting her to glance at it briefly before making her excuses. Instead, she studied it carefully, her finger tracing down the list of items with genuine attention. He watched her face for any sign of the dismissive expression he had seen so many times that day. "Earth coffee," she murmured, reading from the list. "Hand-woven textiles, art objects crafted from natural materials." She looked up at him. "These items have something that most goods in this marketplace lack." "Which is?" "Authenticity," Lyrian said simply. "Everything here is manufactured, optimized, designed by committee to appeal to the broadest possible market. But these," she gestured to the datapad, "these were made by individuals who cared about their craft." Marcus felt a flicker of hope, but years of disappointment had taught him to be cautious. Authenticity is a luxury most buyers can't afford to consider. They want efficiency, durability, cost-effectiveness. "Most buyers, yes," Lyrian agreed. "But not all." She handed the datapad back to him and looked around the marketplace with an expression that might have been amusement or contempt. "Tell me, Marcus Chen, what do you know about the Conclave?" The name was familiar, but Marcus couldn't place it immediately. "I've heard the term, but I'm afraid my knowledge of galactic politics is limited." "The Conclave is not political," Lyrian said. "It is a group of individuals from various species who have grown weary of the shallow materialism that dominates galactic commerce. We seek things of genuine value, items that carry the essence of their creators and their worlds." Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly. This sounded too good to be true, which in his experience usually meant it was. "And you think my goods might interest this group?" "I think," Lyrian said slowly, "that you might interest this group." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, a commotion erupted near the center of the marketplace. The hegemony delegation was apparently not pleased with some aspect of their negotiations, and their voices were rising above the general din. Security drones began moving into position, their soft hum adding an ominous undertone to the scene. Lyrian watched the developing situation with interest, but no apparent concern. "Typical," she observed. "All bluster and intimidation. The hegemony believes that volume equals authority." "Doesn't it?" Marcus asked. "They control most of the major trade routes. That seems to give them significant authority." "Control is not the same as leadership," Lyrian replied, "and authority that relies solely on force is inherently unstable." The commotion was growing louder, and other merchants were beginning to edge away from the hegemony group. Marcus noticed that several of the more experienced traders were quietly packing up their displays, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere," Marcus suggested. Lyrian nodded. "An excellent idea. There is a quiet cafe on level 7. The owner is a friend of mine, and we can speak without interruption." As they made their way through the crowd, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more significant than it appeared. Lyrian moved through the marketplace with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going and expected no interference. Other beings stepped aside for her without seeming to consciously notice they were doing so. The lift to level 7 was mercifully empty, and as they rose through the station's different commercial zones, Marcus tried to process what had just happened. In the span of a few minutes, he had gone from complete failure to what might be a genuine opportunity. It seemed too sudden, too convenient. "You're wondering if this is real," Lyrian observed, apparently reading his expression. "The thought had occurred to me," Marcus admitted. "Skepticism is wise," she said, "but so is recognizing opportunity when it presents itself." The lift opened onto a much quieter level of the station. Where the main marketplace had been all gleaming metal and bright lights, this area had a more subdued atmosphere. The corridor was lined with small shops and cafes that catered to beings who valued comfort over spectacle. Lyrian led him to a small establishment near the end of the corridor. The sign above the door was written in several languages, including Standard Galactic, but Marcus's translator identified it simply as the Quiet Place. Inside, the cafe was exactly what its name suggested. Soft lighting, comfortable seating arranged to encourage conversation, and a gentle background hum that provided privacy without isolation. The proprietor, a being Marcus didn't recognize, nodded respectfully to Lyrian and gestured them toward a corner booth. As they settled into their seats, Marcus realized that this was the first time since arriving at Nexus Station that he had felt truly comfortable. The constant noise and pressure of the marketplace had been replaced by an atmosphere of calm reflection. "Now," Lyrian said, folding her hands on the table, "let us discuss why I sought you out." Marcus waited, sensing that the real conversation was about to begin. "The Conclave is always searching for new perspectives," Lyrian continued. "We have members from most of the major species, but we have been particularly interested in humans." "Why humans specifically?" "Because you are still close to your origins," Lyrian explained. "Most species, when they achieve space travel and join the galactic community, quickly lose touch with what made them unique. They adopt standardized technologies, standardized cultures, standardized ways of thinking. But humans—" She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "Humans still remember what it means to be individuals." Marcus thought about his daughter, about the small farming community on New Geneva where he had grown up, about the countless small acts of creativity and kindness that had shaped his life. And the Conclave values this? The Conclave believes, Lyrian said, that the galaxy is becoming dangerously homogeneous. When all cultures begin to resemble each other, when all goods are manufactured to the same specifications, when all thoughts follow the same patterns, we lose something essential. What? The ability to grow, to change, to surprise ourselves. Marcus nodded slowly. It was an idea that resonated with him, though he had never articulated it so clearly. And what does the Conclave do about this? We preserve what is unique. We seek out individuals and cultures that maintain their distinctiveness, and sometimes, Lyrian's eyes met his, we offer them opportunities to share that distinctiveness with others who value it. The implications were beginning to dawn on Marcus. This wasn't just about selling his coffee and textiles. This was about something much larger. What kind of opportunities? That, Lyrian said, depends on what you are willing to do. Lyrian leaned back in her seat, studying Marcus with those penetrating dark eyes. The soft lighting of the cafe cast shifting shadows across her iridescent features, making her seem almost ethereal. Around them, the gentle murmur of conversation in various languages created a cocoon of privacy. "Tell me about your home," she said suddenly. Marcus blinked, surprised by the apparent change of subject. New Geneva? Yes. What makes it different from other human colonies? Marcus considered the question. Most people asked about population figures, industrial capacity, strategic importance. No one had ever asked what made his home special. It's quiet, he said finally. The original settlers were farmers, artisans, people who wanted to build something with their hands rather than just extract resources and move on. Lyrian nodded encouragingly. We grow things the old way, Marcus continued, warming to the subject. Not in hydroponic factories, but in real soil under real sunlight. The coffee plants my beans come from were started from seeds my grandfather brought from Earth. Each plant is different, each harvest unique. And the people? They know each other's names. They help when help is needed. When my daughter Sarah got sick, the whole community contributed to send me on this trading mission. Marcus paused, realizing how naive that must sound in a galaxy where entire species were bought and sold like commodities. But Lyrian's expression showed no contempt. If anything, she seemed pleased. And this is why the Conclave needs humans in our network. What exactly is this network? Lyrian was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she reached into her jacket and withdrew a small device that looked like a crystalline flower. She placed it on the table between them, and it immediately began to emit a faint, pleasant hum. Privacy shield, she explained. Now we can speak freely. The sounds of the cafe became noticeably muffled, as if they were sitting inside a bubble. Marcus could see other patrons moving and talking, but their voices were reduced to an unintelligible whisper. The Conclave operates what we call the Heritage Network, Lyrian began. It is a trading system that exists parallel to the official galactic commerce channels. We deal in items and services that have cultural significance, emotional resonance, or artistic value. That sounds wonderful, but how is it profitable? You would be surprised, Lyrian said with a slight smile. There are many beings in this galaxy who have grown wealthy through conventional trade but find themselves spiritually impoverished. They hunger for things that have meaning beyond mere function. She gestured around them. This cafe, for instance, the owner could make 10 times more profit with automated service and mass-produced food. Instead, he personally selects every ingredient, prepares every dish with care, and creates an atmosphere where beings can connect with each other rather than simply consuming and leaving. Marcus looked around with new eyes. The other patrons weren't hurried traders grabbing quick meals between deals. They were individuals having real conversations, taking time to savor their food and each other's company. His clients include some of the wealthiest beings in this sector, Lyrian continued. They come here not because it's convenient or cheap, but because it feeds something deeper than hunger. And you think there's a market for goods from New Geneva? I think there's a market for what New Geneva represents, Lyrian corrected. Authenticity, community, connection to the land and to each other. These are rare commodities in our modern galaxy. Marcus felt a stirring of excitement, but experience had taught him to be cautious. What would membership in this network require? Lyrian's expression grew more serious. The Heritage Network is not simply a trading organization. We are also committed to preserving the cultures and communities that create these unique goods. This means that sometimes we must protect them from forces that would exploit or destroy them. What kind of forces? The same ones that turn every unique world into another standardized production facility, corporations that strip mine cultures for profit, governments that impose homogeneous systems on diverse populations. Sometimes, her voice grew harder, groups like the hegemony that view difference as a threat to be eliminated. Marcus remembered the commotion in the marketplace. The hegemony sees the Heritage Network as competition. The hegemony sees anything they cannot control as a threat. They have spent centuries building a system where all trade flows through their channels, all cultures gradually adopt their standards, all unique voices are silenced in favor of unified efficiency. And the Conclave opposes this? The Conclave believes that diversity is strength, that the galaxy is vast enough for many different ways of life, that forcing conformity upon countless species and cultures will ultimately lead to stagnation and collapse. Marcus was beginning to understand the true scope of what Lyrian was offering. This wasn't just about selling coffee beans. It was about joining a resistance movement, a network of beings dedicated to preserving everything that made life in the galaxy rich and varied. What would joining mean for New Geneva? Protection, Lyrian said simply. The Heritage Network has resources and connections that span the galaxy. When the hegemony or other homogenizing forces threaten one of our member communities, we can provide assistance. What kind of assistance? That depends on the nature of the threat. Sometimes it's economic, connecting threatened communities with markets that value their unique products. Sometimes it's technological, providing tools and knowledge that help them maintain their independence. Sometimes, she paused meaningfully, sometimes it requires more direct intervention. Marcus felt a chill. You're talking about conflict. I'm talking about survival, Lyrian replied. The galaxy is changing, Marcus. The old balance between the major powers is shifting. Wars are coming whether we want them or not. The question is whether the galaxy that emerges from those conflicts will have room for places like New Geneva, or whether everything unique and beautiful will be swept away in the name of efficiency and control. The weight of her words settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. He had come to Nexus Station hoping to make enough profit to pay for his daughter's medical treatments. Now he was being asked to make decisions that could affect the future of his entire world. I need to know more, he said finally. About the network, about what membership would really mean, about the risks involved. Lyrian nodded approvingly. Wise. A decision this important should not be made lightly. She touched the crystalline device on the table, and it folded in on itself with a sound like wind chimes. The normal sounds of the cafe returned, but the conversation at nearby tables seemed somehow less significant than it had before. There is someone you should meet, Lyrian said. Another human, someone who has been part of the Heritage Network for several years. She can give you a perspective that I cannot. Another human? From which colony? Originally from the Mars settlements, but she has been traveling the galaxy for a long time now. Her name is Elena Vasquez, and she specializes in what we call cultural protection. Where is she? Lyrian consulted a small device on her wrist. Currently aboard a Heritage Network vessel in the outer system. I can arrange a meeting, but it would require leaving Nexus Station. Marcus thought about his small cargo ship, docked and waiting for him in the station's lower levels. The fuel he had paid for would last another week, but every day he stayed here was another day his daughter went without the treatments she needed. How long would this meeting take? Elena's ship is only 6 hours away at standard acceleration. You could be back here tomorrow morning or... Lyrian paused, studying his expression. You could take your cargo with you. Elena has connections throughout this sector. If you decide to join the network, she could introduce you to buyers who would pay far more for your goods than anyone here. It was a tempting offer, but Marcus had learned to be suspicious of things that seemed too good to be true. And if I decide not to join? Then you return here with a full cargo hold and the knowledge that the offer remains open. The Heritage Network does not pressure potential members. We believe that true commitment must come from understanding and conviction, not desperation. Marcus looked around the cafe one more time, at the beings who had chosen meaning over efficiency, connection over profit. For the first time since arriving at Nexus Station, he felt like he was seeing the galaxy as it truly was, not just the loud, flashy surface that dominated the main marketplace. How do I contact you with my decision? Lyrian reached into her jacket again and withdrew what looked like a simple metal pendant. This is a Heritage Network communicator. It will allow you to reach me anywhere in this system. It's also a token of good faith, proof that our offer is genuine. Marcus took the pendant and was surprised by how warm it felt in his palm. The metal seemed to have a life of its own, responding to his touch with a subtle pulse of energy. Elena's ship is called the Wanderer's Dream, Lyrian continued. If you decide to make the journey, simply tell your navigation computer to plot a course for Heritage Network Beacon 7. The communicator will provide the necessary access codes. She stood to leave, but Marcus had one more question. Why me? Out of all the traders in that marketplace, why did you choose to approach me? Lyrian paused, and for a moment her composed expression softened into something that might have been sympathy. Because you were the only one who treated every rejection with dignity. Because you listened before you spoke. Because when you mentioned your daughter's illness, I could hear that you were not just trying to make money, but trying to save someone you love. She placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. The Heritage Network has many members who are brilliant, wealthy, or powerful. But we also need members who remember what it means to be human. With that, she walked away, moving through the cafe with the same quiet confidence she had shown in the marketplace. Marcus watched her go, the pendant warm and alive in his hand, feeling as if his entire understanding of the galaxy had shifted in the span of a single conversation. He sat alone for a long time, listening to the gentle sounds of beings enjoying each other's company, thinking about choices that could change everything. Outside the cafe's windows, the stars wheeled slowly past, each one representing worlds full of unique cultures and communities that were, according to Lyrian, under threat. Finally, Marcus rose from his seat and made his way back to the lift. He had a decision to make, and not much time to make it. His daughter needed those medical treatments, but perhaps there was more at stake here than just one person's health. Perhaps there was a chance to be part of something larger, something that could preserve the small communities and quiet connections that made life worth living. As the lift descended toward the docking levels where his ship waited, Marcus found himself thinking not about profit margins and cargo manifests, but about his grandfather's coffee plants and the community that had supported his family in their time of need. For the first time since leaving New Geneva, he felt like he might be heading toward something worth the risks involved. The pendant pulsed gently in his pocket. a reminder that some opportunities only come once, and that the choices made in moments of uncertainty could reshape not just individual lives, but entire worlds. The journey to Heritage Network Beacon 7 gave Marcus 6 hours to think, which turned out to be both a blessing and a curse. His small cargo ship, the New Geneva's Pride, hummed quietly through space while he wrestled with the implications of Lyrian's offer. The pendant she had given him sat on his control console, occasionally pulsing with a soft blue light that seemed to match his heartbeat. The beacon itself was invisible to his ship's sensors until he was within a few hundred kilometers. Then it appeared suddenly, not as a structure, but as a shimmering distortion in space that made his navigation instruments sing with harmonious tones. As he approached, following the access codes the pendant provided, the distortion resolved into something extraordinary. The Wanderer's dream was unlike any ship Marcus had ever seen. Where most galactic vessels were built for efficiency and standardization, this one seemed to have grown rather than been constructed. Its hull flowed in organic curves that caught and reflected starlight in patterns that were almost hypnotic. Docking bays opened like flower petals, welcoming him into a space that felt more like a garden than a cargo hold. Elena Vasquez was waiting for him as he stepped off his ship. She was clearly human, but her appearance suggested someone who had spent years adapting to life among the stars. Her hair was streaked with silver despite her apparent youth, and her dark eyes held the same penetrating intelligence that Marcus had seen in Lyrian's gaze. "Welcome aboard," she said, extending a hand. "I understand you're considering joining our little family." "I'm trying to understand what that would mean," Marcus replied, shaking her hand and noting the firm grip of someone accustomed to hard work. Elena smiled. "Come on, let me show you what we're really about." She led him through corridors that defied conventional ship design. Instead of sterile metal walls and harsh lighting, the passages were lined with what appeared to be living wood, glowing softly with bioluminescent panels that provided warm, comfortable illumination. The air smelled of growing things rather than recycled atmosphere. "This ship is a collaborative project," Elena explained as they walked. The hull was grown by the Verdani using their biotechnology. The navigation systems were crafted by the Etherians, incorporating their deep understanding of quantum mechanics. The life support systems were designed by the Terran Collective, drawing on both human engineering and the wisdom of species that have lived in space for millennia. "It's beautiful," Marcus said, running his hand along one of the wooden walls. The surface felt warm and alive beneath his touch. "It's also incredibly functional," Elena continued. "This ship can operate for years without resupply, adapt to almost any environment, and remain undetected by most scanning systems. It represents everything the Heritage Network stands for, a synthesis of different cultures working together while maintaining their unique contributions." They emerged into a central chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The space was vast, far larger than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. Gardens grew in impossible spirals through the air, tended by beings from species Marcus didn't recognize. Children played among the plants while their parents worked at tasks that seemed more like art than maintenance. "Dimensional folding technology," Elena explained, noticing his confusion. "The ship is bigger on the inside than the outside. It has to be, because it's not just a vessel. It's a mobile community." Marcus watched a human child playing with what appeared to be a young Zephyrian, their crystal wings chiming with laughter. Near them, an elderly being with bark-like skin was teaching a group of mixed-species youngsters how to tend a particular type of flowering vine. "How many people live here?" "About 300, representing 47 different species," Elena replied. "Some are permanent residents, others stay for a few months or years, before moving on to other Heritage Network vessels or returning to their homeworlds." "And they all chose this life?" Elena's expression grew more serious. Some chose it. Others had no choice. The hegemony and similar organizations don't just threaten communities economically. Sometimes they destroy them outright, claiming resources or strategic locations. The Heritage Network provides refuge for survivors and for communities that want to preserve their way of life without being tied to a single world. She gestured toward a section of the chamber where adults were working at what appeared to be traditional crafts from various cultures. We're not just preserving objects or traditions, we're preserving the knowledge and skills that create them. When a community is destroyed, we save what we can and keep it alive until it can take root again somewhere else. Marcus thought about New Geneva, about the quiet farms and workshops where his neighbors pursued their crafts with patient dedication. What would happen to my home if I joined the network? That depends on what kind of threats it faces, Elena replied. If it's just economic pressure, we can provide market connections that allow communities to maintain their independence through trade. If it's more serious, she led him to a viewing port where he could see other ships in the distance, some clearly designed for purposes other than peaceful trade. We have resources for more direct protection. You're talking about a private navy. I'm talking about the right to exist, Elena said firmly. The hegemony believes that diversity is inefficient, that the galaxy would be better served if every world followed the same patterns of development and production. They use economic pressure when they can, but they're not above using force when necessary. Marcus stared out at the distant ships. Each one was different, reflecting the aesthetic and technological preferences of its builders, yet they moved together with obvious coordination. It was like watching a school of fish that included dozens of different species. Has New Geneva attracted their attention? Not yet, Elena admitted, but it will. Small agricultural worlds with strong community bonds are exactly the kind of places they target for conversion. They'll offer infrastructure improvements, education programs, technological upgrades, all designed to gradually transform your world into another standardized production facility. And if we refuse? Elena's silence was answer enough. They continued through the ship, visiting workshops where artisans from different worlds shared techniques and knowledge, libraries where the stories and songs of threatened cultures were being preserved, and meeting halls where representatives from various communities planned responses to emerging threats. In one chamber, Marcus watched a heated discussion between beings from 3 different species. The universal translator in his ear provided context. They were debating how to respond to hegemony pressure on a mining world whose inhabitants had maintained traditional extraction methods for centuries. The hegemony claims their new techniques are more efficient, one speaker argued. Perhaps we should consider compromise. Efficiency isn't everything, another replied. Their methods would poison the groundwater and displace the mining families who have worked these tunnels for generations. Then we need to find an alternative, the third interjected. Something that preserves their way of life while still providing the resources they need to survive in a modern economy. Elena quietly explained that this was how Heritage Network decisions were made, through discussion and consensus rather than corporate hierarchies or government mandates. Every community's voice was heard. Every solution was evaluated for its impact on the cultures involved. We don't always succeed, she admitted as they moved on. Sometimes we arrive too late, or the forces arrayed against a community are too strong. But we try to ensure that no culture disappears without someone fighting for it. They ended their tour in Elena's personal quarters, a space that somehow managed to feel both high-tech and homey. The walls were covered with mementos from different worlds, each one telling a story of communities saved or preserved. Now, Elena said, settling into a chair that molded itself to her form, let's talk about what joining the network would mean for you personally. Marcus took the offered seat across from her, noting that his chair adapted to his human physiology with remarkable precision. Lyrian mentioned that you were originally from Mars. Elena nodded. Born and raised in the agricultural domes. My family had been farmers for generations, specializing in hybrid crops that could thrive in Martian soil. We were proud of our work, our community, our traditions. What happened? The hegemony happened. They arrived with offers of modernization, promised to transform Mars into a major agricultural producer for the inner systems. All we had to do was abandon our traditional methods and adopt their industrial farming techniques. Elena's voice carried old pain. My parents thought it was an opportunity. Better profits, easier work, integration with the galactic economy. They signed the contracts before I was old enough to have a say. And within 5 years, the soil was depleted, the community was scattered, and Mars was producing vast quantities of flavorless, nutritionless crops for export. My family's knowledge, developed over generations of careful experimentation, became irrelevant overnight. Marcus could see where this was heading. You lost everything. Almost everything. I managed to preserve some seeds, some genetic samples, some of the old knowledge. I joined the Heritage Network with the hope that someday, somewhere, I could restore what was lost. Elena stood and moved to a wall display that showed images of thriving gardens. 3 years ago, we found a world whose colonists were willing to try the old Martian methods. The crops you see here are descended from seeds my grandmother saved from Earth, adapted over generations to Martian conditions, and now growing in alien soil under foreign stars. The images showed plants that were clearly related to Earth species, but subtly different, adapted to their new environment while maintaining their essential character. It was, Marcus realized, a perfect metaphor for what the Heritage Network was trying to achieve. The network doesn't just preserve cultures, Elena continued. It helps them evolve and adapt while maintaining their core identity. We believe that diversity leads to resilience, that communities which maintain their unique characteristics are better equipped to handle changing circumstances. Marcus thought about his daughter, still waiting for treatment on New Geneva. What about personal obligations? I have family responsibilities that brought me to Nexus Station in the first place. The network takes care of its own, Elena assured him. Medical treatment, education, support during difficulties. We're not asking you to abandon your family or your community. We're offering to make both stronger. She activated a communication panel, and after a brief exchange in a language Marcus didn't recognize, a new figure entered the chamber. This being was clearly reptilian, with scales that shifted color as they moved, but their bearing was unmistakably professional. This is Dr. Kethvar, Elena said. They specialize in medical conditions affecting developing nervous systems across multiple species. The doctor's voice was a melodious hiss when they spoke. I have reviewed the medical records your ship's computer provided. Your daughter's condition is indeed treatable, but not with the primitive methods available in most human colonies. Marcus felt his heart sink. Then there's nothing you can do? On the contrary, Dr. Kethvar continued, their scales shifting to warmer hues. The Heritage Network medical facilities include techniques developed by 17 different species. For conditions like your daughter's, we have treatments that are not just more effective than standard galactic medicine, but also less invasive and more compatible with human physiology. How is that possible? Because we don't limit ourselves to approved, standardized protocols, Elena explained. We draw on medical knowledge from cultures that have been developing healing arts for millennia. Sometimes the old ways, properly understood and carefully applied, are superior to modern methods. Dr. Kethvar activated a holographic display showing complex molecular structures. Your daughter's condition involves a disruption in neural pathway development. Standard galactic treatment involves surgical intervention and artificial neural implants. Our approach uses a combination of Verdani bioregulators and traditional human herbal compounds to encourage natural neural growth. Marcus stared at the display, trying to understand the implications. And this would cure her? More than cure, the doctor replied. Our treatment doesn't just address the immediate problem. It optimizes her entire neural development, potentially enhancing abilities that surgical intervention would permanently impair. The weight of the decision was becoming overwhelming. Join the Heritage Network and his daughter could receive treatment beyond anything available through normal channels. But he would also be committing his community to a struggle that could reshape the galaxy. I need to think, Marcus said finally. Elena nodded understandingly. Of course. This isn't a decision to make lightly, but I want you to understand something important. The Heritage Network isn't asking you to fight a war. We're asking you to preserve what makes life worth living. She gestured toward the viewing port, where stars stretched endlessly into the distance. Out there are millions of worlds, billions of communities, each one unique and precious. The hegemony wants to turn them all into identical copies of each other, efficient and productive and utterly without soul. And you think a network of traders and artisans can stop them? I think, Elena said quietly, that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the simple act of refusing to surrender what makes you who you are. Marcus looked around the chamber one more time, at the mementos of saved cultures and preserved traditions, at the medical display showing hope for his daughter's future, at the faces of beings who had chosen meaning over safety. The choice, when it came, felt inevitable. Tell me what I need to do, he said. Elena smiled, the expression transforming her weathered features into something radiant with hope. First, we help your daughter. Then, we help your community. And then, if you're willing, we help save the galaxy. As the Wanderer's dream began its journey back toward Nexus Station, Marcus stood in the observation chamber watching the stars wheel past. The pendant in his pocket pulsed steadily, no longer a symbol of uncertainty but of belonging. He thought about the marketplace where he had been ignored and dismissed, about Lyrian's quiet approach and her simple question about authenticity, about the choice that had led him here. Sometimes, he realized, the most important moments in history began not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with someone stepping forward and quietly asking, "Will you help me?" The answer, Marcus now understood, could change everything.